go for the 2020 annual mandatory training for Colorado measures of academic success. In this training, this will actually be a two-part training. Part one will be by myself, Amy Ward, for test administrator basics. Part two will be done by your school assessment coordinator, which will get you into all the ins and outs of site specific things you need to know and also navigating Pearson Access Next. So for the overview, first of all, you need to log in and make sure that your password is good to go. New teachers should have gotten an email from Pearson asking them to set up your account. If you have not, please talk to your school assessment coordinator. For everyone else, you can go to this website, co.pearsonaccessnext.com, and try to sign in from last year. It probably has already saved your password from next year, but more than likely, when you try to sign in, on the page it looks like this. You would go to the green sign in button, click there. Your password's probably still saved, but more than likely it will ask you to change your password from last year. They ask you to do that on a yearly basis. But before you log in, know that there's some other information on this page that might be helpful. There's plenty of related links that may be helpful, especially to the Colorado Assessment webpage, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. And also, if you're interested in working with CDE during the summertime to review item types or to write items for the next school year, this would be great for math teachers or ELA teachers and science and social studies. This year we do have a buy in social studies, so no grade level or building level will be taking the social studies test this year. And as we get going, when are we testing? So first of all, the CMAS and COALT. CMAS is Colorado Measures of Academic Success, and COALT is a Colorado alternative for students who are most impacted students. This is for ELA and math only, and it says 3 through 11, but it really should say 3 through 8th grade only, because 9th through 11th grade take PSAT and SAT for ELA and math. And the Salidas window starts as early as March 30th. All tests have to be finished up by April 24th. For the science test, like I said, social studies isn't on here this year because we have a bye this year. For our science test for CMAS and COAL, that would be grades 5, 8, and 11. And science tests can't start any earlier than April 6th. And again, they must be finished by April 24th. And then the third test will be the COALT, Colorado Alternatives, for ELA and math. Those are our most impacted students. Nancy Powers does that assessment for us, and she'll be working directly with the providers to schedule that assessment. Okay, so what's new here? First of all, there's a new Colorado portal for our CMAS and Colorado Alternative. It's called coassessments.com, and this is where you can find all kinds of training information, including the student practice tests and released items. The next thing, and really the only other thing that's new this year, is a different way to record the timing of the assessment and to calculate the different timings of the assessment. This is because the number one mistake that educators make is not timing correctly, which leads to a misadministration. So that is a little different this year. At the beginning of each section or session, there is a chart that looks like this. And in that chart, it will ask you to put the start time, what time you are going to announce a 20-minute warning, what time you are going to announce the 10-minute warning for each unit, and don't forget to include the stand and stretch break. That's for 3 minutes if you should choose to do that. And then also there's a timing guide in the test administrator manual this year that will help you in figuring out which, no matter what time you stop, what time the session should stop. For those of you who have administered SAT, ACT tests before, There's a timing manual that goes along with that, very similar. It just helps you make sure that you don't miscalculate anything. So please use those tools. For your testing schedule, as you know, those of you who have done this test before, that first day is always a little bit hectic. And so their recommendation is you take about 10 to 15 minutes to give yourself to read those directions, follow the directions as written, use those directions to know when to pass out your testing tickets, when to pass out the scratch paper. I know that first day is sometimes very stressful, but just let the test administration directions guide your actions. And then you'll have your however long your test is, and then your wrap up activities, sometimes between 5 and 15 minutes. That first day is always a little longer, and it will get a little bit faster as you go. Make sure you know how long the test you are administering is that day. Double check that in your manual when you read it, and I'm not going to go over each grade level and how long each test is. However, you can use your test administration manual to see these, and also your school assessment coordinator will have these handouts for you. I'm just going to point out one here, math, grades 6 through 8. This is the most confusing one there is because Unit 1, there's actually 2 different sessions that have to be completed in that 65-minute time period. There's the non-calculator section and the calculator section, and when students move from that non-calculator section to the calculator section, they actually have to submit the non-calculator section before moving on, and sometimes that is confusing, and it will there have been misadministrations for people thinking that that was the end of the test, and really it's just moving from one session to another session that both have to be completed within 65 minutes. So if you are administering grades 6 through 8 math tests, please double check that in your directions. And high school science. All right, some guidelines for the administration time. When you are filling that out, please add the unit testing time to the start time to determine the stop time. Make sure you triple check this so it doesn't result in a miscalculation. You need to make sure that you do provide the entire amount of unit testing time that is provided for each test. And then once that unit testing time is met, the unit must end regardless of anyone who is still testing. They will need to end their test unless they are a student who will be in a separate extended time session. And those are students who have extended timing as an accommodation as part of an IEP 504 or ELL plan. READ plans do not qualify for this. However, let's say it's a 60-minute test and everyone finishes in 49 minutes, you can end that testing session. Once everyone is done, then they're done. There is no minimum testing time. However, if everyone is finished and you still have that one student still testing, they get the entire time that was scheduled for that assessment. You may not encourage them to finish the test unit early. A student may be allowed extended time if they have that accommodation as part of one of their plans. ELA and math, time and a half is not included in the unit testing time, so those students need to be in a special testing session. However, science and social studies time and a half is included in the unit testing time, and the students can be tested together unless students need even more time than that. Then those students with accommodations can have up to double time on science and social studies. So what is active administration? We need to make sure that we actively administer these assessments so that we maintain the standardization of the assessments so that a score in Salida, Colorado means the same thing as any other score in any other district and situation. We need to make sure that students have all the necessary materials, maintain that standardized testing environment, move throughout the room during testing, Make sure you follow all of the directions and scripts exactly as written, even on that third day of testing. However, once you've read them exactly, then you can reread and clarify the say directions, the general administration directions, not the directions for a specific item, to students when asked. So you can clarify them in your own words if you need to do that. Please make sure you use proximity to keep students on task. I know it's very tempting to grade papers at your desk, but this is very important to keep students engaged. And also, if students become off task, make sure you use the continue working script that is in the test administrator manual, along with your best get back on track teacher glare that you can. Prohibited activities. That is very important that test administrators not engage in any activities that would impact validity, reliability, or fairness of the assessment. So, you may not provide feedback or coach students. You may not clarify test questions. This is the hardest one for teachers to do because that is kind of our role as teacher. But remember, this is not our role as teacher. We're now test administrators. Read passages, sources, or test questions to students unless it's part of their accommodation. You cannot answer content related questions, interfere with the student's demonstration of skills, interact with students in any way that would impact their student responses, or allow students to communicate with each other in any way, or use prohibited materials. Engage, and you may not engage in any other tasks during test sessions like cleaning out your file cabinets or grading papers. You may not actively read or view the assessment items or content before, during, or after testing unless it's part of an accommodation. And please do not actively read, view, score formally or informally, or comment on student responses unless it's part of an accommodation. Please make sure that you protect those test materials and do not leave them unsecured, or disclose or discuss any of the test content through verbal exchange, email, social media, or any other form of communication, no matter how cute that response was or unbelievable. Or download any part of the assessment unless it's part of a special accommodation. So between units, there will be breaks, especially like the science test that will likely be all 3 units in one day. And during those scheduled breaks, students may not have access to their cell phones. During each unit, you may give a short stand and stretch break, not to exceed 3 minutes. It is up to your discretion if you feel that students need that, but please make sure you schedule that into the stop time of the timing of the assessment. And restroom breaks, students may go to the restroom during the test, but it does not stop the clock. So any student who is absent or becomes ill or for whatever reason can no longer finish the test, they may make up test on the next day. However, they are not allowed to return to any completed portion of the test. On the computer-based testing, this is very difficult to do. However, if you are administering a paper-based assessment, then it's actually very easy to do. And as a test administrator, you need to make sure that that doesn't happen. In make-up testing, test security and administration protocols still apply, and all content areas must be administered in sequential order, even including makeup testing. So if a student is absent on session 1, when they come in the next day for session 2, all the rest of the class is taking session 2, and that student needs to take session 1. The test directions are the same with the exception of 6th through 8th grade math, unit 1 and 2 the test directions are very different. So during administration, if students finish early, individual students can sit quietly or read. They can read a magazine or a book. However, they cannot read using electronic devices. Something that your school needs to decide is if there's going to be a minimum time set for the testing environment. For example, before any student can submit their assessment when they are finished, will they have to sit with the assessment, let's say, for 20, 25, 30 minutes before they are allowed to submit their answers? That's a decision that the school or the site needs to make. All right, also, when you are reading your test administrator manual, when you get to the say directions, there are 3 options. We are all going to read option C, so please make note of that. And that is that students may read when they are done testing. Another option that we have is for scratch paper for ELA Science and Social Studies. For math, it's required. But for ELA Science and Social Studies, your school needs to make the decision if you're going to provide scratch paper, let's say, for students to use as a plan when they're writing or answering any of their science questions. So once your team makes that decision, then you'll need to decide which option in the TAM to say. Other administrative considerations. So administrative considerations are anything that changes the environment of the testing that may benefit a student. This is available to any student as long as test security is not compromised. So what are they? They are adaptive seating and specialized equipment such as stand-up desks, frequent breaks that do not stop the clock, noise buffers and headphones, small group testing, specified or separate or alternative area for seating, and time of day. If you are administering any accessibility feature or accommodation, you need to make sure that you are fully trained on that particular accessibility feature or accommodation. So, what are they? First of all, auditory presentation. This would be oral script and text to speech, but it's different depending on if the test is English language arts or math, science, and social studies. So for ELA, students cannot use an oral script or a text to speech unless it was CDE approved, which we call that a unique accommodation request. And we did make several applications this year, and some students were approved for that. The oral script can only be used for a paper-based presentation, and text to speech would be the computer-based presentation. It is never okay to read from the screen on a computer-based assessment to students. So for math, science, and social studies, this is an accessibility feature, not an accommodation. That means that any student who uses it in day-to-day instruction can have access to it. This would be for English or Spanish text-to-speech in math, science, or social studies. The next accommodation is called a scribe, and for English language arts, for constructed responses, there's a difference between whether it is a human, so if the student is telling the answer to an adult, or recording their own voice like on an iPad. So if it is a human capturing the response, it is a unique accommodation requiring to be approved by CDE. And we did make several applications this year that were approved. However, a lot of our students, especially with the rise of and acknowledgement more of dyslexia, then some of our students are using a device to capture the response. So they are talking, they are recording their answer into an iPad. The test itself does not recognize, you can't record into the test. So students who have that accommodation can use an iPad on airplane mode. The student responds with their answer into the recording of the note section on an iPad. Then they can type their answer right into the assessment, or an adult can type their answer into the assessment. But as long as the device is capturing the response, it is an accommodation and not a unique accommodation request. And we do have several students that are using that accommodation as well. For math or science, for the constructed response, whether it's device or human, it is allowed as part of an accommodation for students who are on 504, ELL plan, or IEP plan. READ plans do not qualify. Technology in the environment. The only exception to this rule is that if a student is using a device to monitor a medical condition, they can have it in the room. We need to make sure that we have documentation. We need to know where the device is located and who has control of the device. If the student is monitoring on their own, then that device must be visible at all times. It needs to be on their desk and may not be used for any other purpose. And we need to make sure that everyone knows what to do if that device then alerts for an issue. Chain of custody forms. This is very important and something we do every year. We need to make sure that we document any movement of the secure materials before, during, or after testing. You need to make sure that you sign or complete the chain of custody form when you're checking out, or in materials. Anytime you receive materials such as scratch paper, oral script, or student testing tickets from your school assessment coordinator, only on the day of testing, not the day before or afterwards. Please do it during the test and movement of the test on test administration day. You should only receive the content area and the grade level being assessed at that time. So it is your responsibility, all of our responsibility, to maintain the security of the assessment. So anytime you have the materials, they must be secured while in your possession. You may not duplicate any of the materials. There can be no cell phones or other communication, reproduction, or recording devices allowed during the test sessions unless it's required for accessibility. Students should be aware that cell phones or other electronic devices are prohibited. Students who are found with electronic devices in their possession during the testing, including if they have finished testing but other students have not, or during a break, may lead to the invalidation of their assessment and maybe everyone in the testing environment. All individuals are strictly prohibited from taking any photos of TestNav screens, even if there's an issue. So what is secure and what is not? Testing tickets, rosters, oral scripts, any visual description documents, any used scratch paper, even if it's just a little heart on it, any student work responses, any printed math reference sheets or periodic table, which is typically only for students who have paper-based assessment, because if they are using a computer, then it pops up for them. It's not a separate document. So what's non-secure? So those are all secure materials that you need to make sure that you sign in and out on the chain of custody forms. Non-secure materials is that TAM, that test administrator manual. Take it home, highlight it, mark it up, mark your pages, make sure you know it inside and out. The procedure manuals, which is probably just used by your school assessment coordinator, unused scratch paper, and any of those reference sheets for paper-based assessment, as long as they're not written on. Headphones, they are required for students who need text-to-speech. They can be in a testing room with other students who are not using text-to-speech, but a little note of that, I think the elementary school is fine because everyone is using the headphones even as a noise buffer, so students don't know who has text-to-speech and who doesn't. But I think for older students, it becomes an issue. Students don't want to be embarrassed by needing headphones, and so it is best that those students are in a separate testing environment. They can be used for noise buffers. The old park used to have sections that would have audio during any part of the test, but CMAS assessments do not contain any audio unless text to speech is used, not even the science assessment test. Okay, in your room configuration, this is really important that students not be able to see each other's work from a normal testing positions. You need to make sure that you consider the following seating configurations: every other seat, monitors back to back, students back to back, seat students in a semicircle or widely spaced rows, every other rows, using dividing screen or other privacy materials. Please do not have those students sitting side by side where they can see each other's screen easily. So on the testing environment, make sure that it is comfortably well lit, free of any distractions, heated or cool. Students need to make sure that they have adequate writing surface, whether it's paper-based test or not. Free of any background noise. I know there's a lot of research out there saying students do better with background noise, background music, but it is not allowed for this assessment, because you never know that student that it might be bugging. Make sure you have appropriate signage. If there's one not, if you don't have it in your tote, maybe it was accidentally left out, make your own. Make sure that you write up on the board the timing information so students can use that to guide their own testing, and that you have the correct times up there. Triple check that. Also, in the testing environment, you need to make sure that there are no cell phones, with the exception of the test administrator may have it for emergency use only. You should not be using it as a timing device. You should use the clocks in the room that everybody else has access to as well. Your phones the ringer and vibration must be silenced so it is not a disruption. And also for students using devices as a medical monitoring device. Other electronic devices that are not allowed: e-readers, personal document scanners, electronic pens, which several students use, smartwatches, which are all over the place, iPods and MP3 players, etc. Any instructional aid relevant to content being assessed, or reference book. This would be an exception for, we do have a few ELL students who still use a word-to-word dictionary. It's a dictionary that does not have definitions. It just simply has the English word in the Spanish translation or vice versa. And of course, no food or drinks are allowed on students' desks. They can keep them maybe on a table on the side. So make sure your rooms are ready to go for testing day. Other things to be thinking about is the content that you have on your walls. Posters that do not include content specific directions, content related processes, or solutions may remain on the wall. Prohibited visual aids need to be removed or covered, like number lines, word walls, steps for solving math equations, maps, charts, models, or any content related material that is related to the test being administered. Any resource that defines, explains, or illustrates terminology or concepts. So when in doubt, cover it. We shouldn't have any testing rooms that exceed 30-to-1 ratio. Make sure you actively monitor the space within the testing environment. Make sure you make any special considerations or room configuration changes for the test day. Make sure the main thing, just actively proctor. Remain attentive during the testing session and circulate throughout the room. I know it's very in our busy schedules, it's very tempting to grade those papers that you have, but you need to actively administer this assessment. You should also be able to see students working, but not see individual work. So only those who have signed the agreement and who have been trained in our CMAS test administration can be in the testing environment. No media and no parents. If you think there's anything weird happening, a testing irregularity, or any kind of security breach, just please call your school assessment coordinator and talk it over to them, and be prepared to provide a written summary if need be. If there is any kind of safety threat or severe weather, first of all, take care of the students first. That's most important. However, if there is time, just make a note of the disruption. If you can, secure the test materials if there is time, but always see first, take care of kids, and then upon return, we'll prepare the students back for the continuation and resume any of the assessments, and we'll document that situation in writing if need be. So, we first of all need to make sure that our students are prepared to take the assessment. The practice resources are on that assessment that I mentioned before called coassessments.com, and so are released items. We have a new acronym, ladies and gentlemen. It's the practice tests are no longer called EPATs, they're now called CPRs. I know you were so excited about a new acronym in education. The Colorado Practice Resources, they are there for computer-based testing and paper-based testing. The CPR guides include scoring information, so answer keys and rubrics. There is also an updated TestNav tutorial to walk students through the various administration types. So, because during this, it's so important because during testing, we can't help students with test navigation. We can only help students log on and log off. Anything else in between, we are not supposed to help students with. So, can't help them answer a question, can't help to show them how to go on to the next question or to the review screen at the end of the assessment. We may not help them with the drag and drop or any other technology enhanced item. That is why going through the practice items are so important, so students are able to navigate through the test on their own. Which includes all the accessibility features, the cross-app tools, the zoom tools, the color contrast tools, the protractor tools, any of the math navigation tools, and there's like a lot of those. So make sure students know how to go over those tools. When you get to the student practice resource page, it looks something like this. So you'd have to choose your subject area, and this is before the students, you got to get the computers ready for the practice test before students are in the practice environment, so that if you look, there's practice items for computer based, and on another page there's paper based. If students have text to speech versions, or if they have text to speech as an accommodation, they need to do the text to speech versions or the Spanish text to speech version, which we do have some students who will be accessing that. Also, it's really important once you are able to log on to Pearson Access Next and you can see your test sessions, you want to look at your roster and make sure that the students who you know are supposed to have accommodations do indeed have those accommodation markers beside their name. It is very important. Like if you know a student is supposed to have text to speech and they don't have that TTS marker beside their name, you let your school assessment coordinator know before the test starts. We triple, quadruple check this every single year, and every single year we miss one. And so you need to help us out with this by looking at your roster and making sure the students have what they need, because once the student starts the assessment and they were supposed to have text to speech and they don't, it's now a misadministration and we can't do anything about it once the student starts the test. So before things to do before testing is make sure you prepare your environment, make sure you've read the TAM, make sure, most important, you know what, when and where testing will take place, so there's no confusion about that. Make sure you arrange for any school supplied materials. Also, it's really important to know, and your school assessment coordinator will go over this, you know what the different colors mean for once students are in the testing environment and you're monitoring on Pearson Access Next. Make sure you refresh your browser often. If students are just in the gray zone, they're ready to test, they're not actually testing, it will turn green for active if students are testing. If students need to deposit test for some reason and you resume their test, it will turn orange. If they've been kicked out for any reason, it will go to red, exited, or it will be blue for completed. You will need to know how to log into Pearson Access Next, unlock and lock your units, log students on and off for TestNav, which your school assessment coordinator will go over. Understand the testing status. Know how to resume student tests. This is really important because you will have students who their test will be interrupted either involuntarily or voluntarily, or stuff happens. You will need to be able to verify when a student is finished and in completed status, and you will not stop sessions. Only Jim Sampson will stop sessions. So there's more information and individual training modules for just about anything you can imagine on that coassessments.com page. And we're cruising to the end here. It's really important to know the main thing that you will be doing is unlocking and locking sessions. And so if students are logging into the assessment that first day and you followed all the directions and they go in with their testing tickets and everything's going smoothly, and then 25 students go, Miss Ward, I can't log in. More than likely you forgot to unlock the assessment, or that unit. So make sure that you know that how to unlock and lock those units. And it also comes into play, like if a student is absent for unit 1 and they come for unit 2, you unlock everybody for unit 2 except for that student. You're going to have to manually lock for unit 2 and open unit 1, because so that student can take the assessment in order. Only one unit can be unlocked at a time. This really makes it very hard for students to take a unit that they're not supposed to be in. It's virtually, it won't happen. However, if you are administering a paper-based assessment, it is so easy for students to go on to the next unit when they weren't supposed to. Let's say they finish unit 1 early and then everybody else is working and you don't notice they are finished unit 1 and they just keep working. Well, as soon as they have turned that page into unit 2 and they have started, now that's a misadministration. And so that's why actively proctoring is so important, especially on those paper-based assessments. All right, so the rest of this training will be done by your school assessment coordinator. You will go over exactly what to expect on the day of testing. You will learn the important information that's on that testing ticket, how to handle interruptions, and how to resume tests during testing. You will learn explicit information about how to resume a student, how to know if a student has been kicked out, etc. on test day. You will learn how to make sure that that math unit that I mentioned earlier in grades 6 through 8, how to deal with that. You will also learn how to help students submit their assessments and know that the answers are submitted, and the importance of locking that unit at the end, any troubleshooting guidance, and any issues with individual items with your SAC. So at this time, your SAC will take over, and don't forget to sign that security agreement form. All right, thank you and happy testing.